I want to talk a little bit about the Rocket Summer. You just recently opened for them. What was that experience like for you?
That was so fun. It was super cool. My sister actually saw the Rocket Summer just a few years ago up here in Seattle, and I wasn't able to go with her, and I was kind of bummed. So being able to go and open for 2 shows for them was gnarly and so fun. Getting kind of out of my usual stomping grounds and seeing some new places I'd never been was super fun. And being able to just take it all in and learn from watching such an incredible artist and incredible act. I feel like I've learned so much about performing just from watching them in their hour-long set.
You're listening to OurSpace with Matt Vettese.
Today I'm hanging out with someone who's quietly been building some buzz in the alternative music scene with over 500,000 Spotify listeners. We're talking to Dylan Espeseth. He's got raw lyrics, big melodies, and a bit of a blend of Motion City Soundtrack, which if you've been listening to the show and follow me on social media, you know they're one of my faves. He's got that Motion City Soundtrack energy with a little bit of Saves the Day, little bite in there as well. He's gearing up to drop his debut album. It's coming out this February. And he just came off a support slot for the Rocket Summer, which is also really sweet and definitely throws me right on back to that as well. He's kicking off his rollout with a brand new single called Circles. Well, that just dropped on November 13th. So it's out now by the time this episode airs. With that debut album, you're going to have to head on over to Spotify, pre-save it either now after the chat, but definitely after this chat, you're going to want to pre-save that for sure. We're going to dig into this record. We're going to talk about the writing of it. We're going to talk about that Rocket Summer support slot and a lot more. And now let's welcome to the show, Dylan Espeseth. How's it going, man?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for doing this. I got to say, I was introduced to your stuff and I got sent a copy of your upcoming debut record. And immediately as I hit play on that first track, I was like, yep, I want to talk to this guy. Like immediately, I was like, yep, this is right up my alley. This is sick. Like I already knew. And as the record sort of continued, I was like, yeah, absolutely. This absolutely nailed, I guess, a mix of alternative with some emo in there. You feel very much like a really cool new up and coming alt artist. I wouldn't even fully put you into that emo scene, but you've got the emotional sort of depth in the songs as well. So I'm kind of curious because I saw somewhere that your influences are really, they kind of come from Fall Out Boy and Dashboard Confessional, but some of that emo rap of the 2010s as well, Juice WRLD and Lil Peep. But then also I see Bob Dylan on your list of influences there. So like, tell me a little bit about you and what you grew up listening to and how all of these sort of influences come in to make the music that you're making.
First off, thank you so much for your kind words. But I think my influences have always had kind of a wide breadth to them. When I was younger, most of my music taste came from my parents, specifically my dad, who he was super into all of that like early 2000s emo, pop punk, alt rock world way before I ever was. So he put me on to Dashboard Confessional and Taking Back Sunday and kind of that whole scene when I was really young, which I'm very grateful for now. And then especially Bob Dylan is my dad's like all-time favorite artist. So that was kind of always playing on our car rides and in our house over the speakers and everything. So those two are very much ingrained in me for like a long time. And then once I reached kind of middle school, high school and started looking into my own music and discovering stuff on Spotify and diving in deep on YouTube playlists and all of that stuff, I think I found what I feel like is really a mix of the two in a lot of ways, being like Midwest emo and pop punk, as well as just like old school folk stuff. Like when I was first learning how to play guitar, most of my guitar skills came from learning how to cover Lumineers songs and Mumford and Sons songs, as well as just like some old Bob Dylan and even like old country stuff. And then I think kind of fusing that with the more pop punk Midwest emo stuff came to what I feel like is morphed into being my sound with a little bit of that kind of like emo rap fusion mixed in there too.
Listen, if you tell me that Dashboard Confessional and Fall Out Boy are like your dad's favorite bands and that's considered dad rock these days, I might get a little bit offended. But at the same time, I know that the Midwesty emo stuff is rarely ever considered dad rock or sort of a part of that end of things. So how did you find your way into the emo world outside of the typical, 2000s nostalgia bands now?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, like a hyper specific story is at one point in high school, one of my friends just posted on their like Instagram story or something, here's like my 10 favorite songs right now. And I was looking to just like bond with this friend and talk about music. And I knew some of the other stuff they liked, I was a big fan of. So I was like, I'm going to go through and listen to all of these. And one of them was like a deep cut, unreleased, I think, modern baseball song. And I
knew you were going to say modern baseball.
Yep. I had to dive deep on YouTube to find like some version of it that was uploaded, like a live video of them performing it. There was like no officially released version of it. And then through doing that, I just ended up finding all of these cool like playlists and underground artists doing all of this super interesting stuff. I feel like that was one of the first times that me as like an individual being 14 or whatever found these artists fully on my own, not being put on by like my parents or like an uncle or something, just fully dove into the internet and found these things. And I feel like that gave me such a ownership over them where I was like, this is my music now. I found this on my own and I'm going to own it and run with it.
It's funny because I feel like that's exactly the type of thing that helps us kind of find our own, because that was it too. Like you said, like there's always an uncle or a friend or a family member or a dad or whatever that like gets you into your music. But, for me, it was diving into MySpace and finding a lot of these bands. I was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. This is what I like now. This is who I am. It's not the grunge that got me into it. It's the stuff that I found on my own. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of cool that you ended up going down that rabbit hole to find that. So how does that all work into your sound as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think really with this upcoming album, it's kind of the pinnacle of everything I've been trying to develop as a sound. My first few releases and like my first EP was all stuff that I'd pretty much recorded and produced entirely on my own with fairly limited experience and resources. So most of that music is, I would say, like acoustic folk punky, which partially is a stylistic choice. I love that stuff, but also is partially just because I didn't have a drum set. For like a lot of it, I didn't even own an electric guitar. So it was fully just me miking my acoustic guitar and doing whatever I could in GarageBand to make it sound passable. So that kind of led to, I feel like, a lot of my style. Yeah. And then I knew for a long time, like I wanted to build into this more like rocky pop punk emo, like full band sound. So when I met with Aaron Sprinkle for the first time to talk about working together like a year ago, that was one of the first things I said. And he had some really cool ideas and we sent back and forth like some inspiration. And I kind of walked him through on a couple of the songs, like, this is what I have in my acoustic demo, but I want you to work your magic and make it a full, how can we make this a full production? How can we add in the electric and the bass and the drums and make it sound huge?
And I think that, as someone that's heard the album, I think that you accomplished that, but I'm kind of curious, how do you take all those influences, especially as a younger up and coming artist in that sense of things, and develop your own signature sound, right? Because everybody's got to have their own signature sound, but how do you take that and be like, yeah, there's a lot of things that come from this area, but this specifically makes it mine?
Yeah, totally. I feel like so much of it's just trial and error, at least for me. Like the first probably dozen songs I put out like 7 or 8 songs that are nowhere on the internet anymore that I just wiped, but the first several, I feel like there was nothing, like I look back on them fondly, but there was nothing unique about them. I was just like, I'm going to do my version of what this other artist is doing. And they all had a totally different sound. I'd have one that was like a straightforward pop song, and then one that was a total folk punk song, and then another one that was me rapping over a beat I made. And they're all a totally different direction. And I think the first time I felt like I really found my sound was honestly probably with my song Falling Faster, which is like since kind of blown up. But I remember when I wrote that song, I felt like this is something that feels so authentic to me and doesn't feel like me doing my version of another artist. It feels like I'm just doing my thing. And then from there, I think I was able to kind of find what feels authentic and what doesn't. And in reality, I think it's basically just a mix of all of the things I listen to and like, and probably what I feel like my style is, quote unquote, week to week varies depending on what I've been doing and what I've been listening to and how I've been feeling. Sometimes it's a lot more upbeat and sometimes it's way more mellow and dramatic, you know?
And of course, artists evolve and their sounds change and all of that, right? So I feel like as an artist, you're probably always going to be sort of discovering yourself. But when you're putting out that first debut full length, I'm sure you know have experimented, figured that out. But that's coming out later in February. And I'm sure you put a lot of thought into that. So what are you hoping this release accomplishes for yourself as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beautiful thing about albums is there's just so much more freedom than is an option in singles and EPs. So this being my first like full length project, I feel like unlocked a lot of freedom for me, where I'm really proud of the singles and EPs I've put out. But there were also times, even when I was working on my last EP, where I was like, oh, I like this song, but I just don't know that it fits in. If I'm picking 4 songs, this one just feels like the outlier. Whereas on this project, I feel like there were a few songs where I'd been sitting on them for a long time and was like, I think this can fit in here. You know, not every single song has to be the one and only introduction to you as an artist to anyone that might be listening to it, which with singles, I feel like that's kind of the case. Is every song, there's a good chance it's someone's first time hearing you. Whereas a deep cut on an album, I'm able to know people are probably finding this through another song and listening. And so it opens up a lot more freedom to do something and experiment and do sounds that I feel like wouldn't normally be something I would expect to do, but I'm really proud of how they turned out.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of looking at it too, right? Like you kind of pulling them in with the single, but then after that, it's kind of like pulling them in with, I don't know, the dessert. And then when they get there, they're actually getting the full meal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What are you hoping that listeners take away from this debut record?
I mean, I think big picture, emotionally, I don't want it to be relatable just for the sake of it being relatable, but I want people to listen to it and possibly feel and realize that other people have felt the same things as them. I feel like with albums and artists that I love, that's always been one of my favorite things to take away, is listening to something and going like, wow, I've felt that and didn't even know how to say it. And this person has put that into words. So I think if I could do that with any of these songs, that would be my like big picture dream of how to connect with people on an emotional level through this music.
I love that, because I mean, that's usually the best music, right? Is being able to emotionally connect to a song. Speaking of that though, Circles, your latest single.
Yes.
So that song kind of captures frustration and burnout and chaos and all of that. And that's a very emotional song in and of itself. Was there a specific moment in time or experience that song was in your head at the time? Or is that just speaking a little bit more generally in hoping that that would be relatable?
I think a mix of both. I mean, I think this song is actually by a significant margin, the oldest one on the album. I wrote this, I think 4 years ago, probably. So it was still also very much kind of the height of the pandemic. So I think a big part of it was feeling stuck in this place. And it was right after I'd finished college and kind of a bunch of my friends living 2 hours away and me feeling very isolated and feeling like stuck and nothing's changing. And there's all of this momentum and like going through this kind of evolution. I feel like graduating college is normally a time where you go out into the world, but feeling like with the pandemic and the job market and everything, feeling like I should be going out there, but the world is pushing me back in, and kind of that feeling of being stuck and isolated and not being able to break out of everything I was feeling at the time. And I'd just been sitting on that song for a while until I felt like it was the right time to release it. But I think also just like big picture, that's still something that resonates with me, probably in different ways now, but just the idea of no matter what you do, you're still yourself. You know, it's the classic saying of wherever you go, there you are. You know, you can try and run from yourself, but you're still with you. And if you're not confronting your feelings and your emotions and the things that are the root causes of your mental health struggles, then you're not getting better ever.
I love that. And that's very, very wise. And I feel like a lot of people need to hear that. You mentioned the pandemic, though, writing the song throughout the pandemic. So through the pandemic, you actually taught yourself a lot more on the technical side, producing and recording and doing all of that portion, right? Now, big picture, when you kind of scope out, do you ever look back at that era of the pandemic and sort of feel grateful for it that you sort of had that time to learn and do in that creative portion? Or do you still kind of look back and think, fuck, that sucked?
No, I think, I mean, absolutely a mix of both, but I think I definitely, with the benefit of hindsight, can look back and say, like, I know for a fact I would not be here right now if it weren't for that. Like, I wouldn't be making music or doing, I mean, I'm sure I'd still be making music, but I don't think I'd be at the level that I'm at had I not done that. Being forced to go home and slow down and be stuck gave me an opportunity to be bored, which I think is what caused me to learn so much about recording and producing and all of that. And I'd been writing and releasing music for years at that point, but I didn't know so much of the technical stuff. I was just kind of winging it my whole way through, which honestly, half the time I still am these days, but I know a passable amount now. So I think that opportunity to like be forced into sitting at home alone and just having all of this time to stare at my computer and watch tutorials. I don't think without being forced into that situation, I would have decided to dive in and learn that much. I know I would still be writing and releasing music, but I don't think I would have honed my craft in the same way had I not been kind of forced to slow down and reflect.
What's learning that technical side of things done for your actual songwriting? Has that changed anything?
I think definitely. I mean, probably in more ways than one. I think with just learning how to produce and basically use Logic, and moving from GarageBand into Logic and all of these like more technical things, I think it's unlocked so many new options. For a long time, the only way I would ever write something would be on a guitar. I would play the acoustic chords and I would sing along. And then kind of learning how to do this, I've been able to write to beats I've made or write to different melodies or samples and kind of add in these different techniques and methods I never would have thought of doing had I not known how. As well as like more recently, I've been learning to play the piano, and that's unlocked a whole new world. Even now when I'm writing stuff just on my acoustic guitar, which is still, I'd say how I do 80 to 90% of my writing, I have a whole new perspective now with this knowledge of what's possible and what chord progressions work together and all of that. Just, I think anytime you learn something new, it kind of reshifts your framework for how you look at it.
And like, you had that time to learn all of these things throughout the pandemic, and it's changed everything that you just basically mentioned. Now, what would you say to somebody who wants to write music at the level that you're doing at now? Would you recommend learning the technical side of things? Or is that kind of something that you're like, meh, if I didn't have the pandemic, it wouldn't make that much of a difference, you know?
That's a good question. I think it depends for everyone. I mean, I think if you're really wanting to jump in and start producing and releasing, like the only way to do it is to do it. Like the early stuff I released, now that I look back and listen to, I think is not good. But I also know I never would have gotten better without just jumping in and doing my very first opening up a GarageBand session and recording. But I think for writing specifically, like the only way that I feel like I've gotten better at writing is just writing a lot. I don't think I've necessarily even gotten better at writing. I just write so much that the good stuff comes to the surface, where like when I was younger, I'd write one song and be like, oh, this song's not that good. And now I'm writing 5 or 6 songs a week, or sometimes 3 or 4 songs in a day if I'm feeling super inspired. And probably still 80% of them, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to go back and finish that. But then there's one verse or one chorus or one line that sticks out and I go, okay, this is good. This is something to build off. So I think just starting doing it and doing it a lot is the only way, for me at least, to improve at writing.
I want to talk a little bit more about the record as well. What song do you think is the most personal to you, and why?
There's probably 2 that stand out. The first one, which actually I think they're the first and last songs on the album, which is fitting, I suppose. But the first one being Nothing Happens, which I've told a few people I think is the hardest song I've ever written for multiple reasons, but not the least of which is it feels like a very honest reflection on my career and what I feel like are my shortcomings. So I was trying to be almost critical of myself, and it took me a long time to write it because I was trying to write honestly, but also being critical of my writing in the process of being critical of myself. It felt like just a total spiraling feedback loop where I had one verse I really liked and I was like, I don't want to ruin this song by writing a bad verse. So I ended up writing like 30 verses and whittling them down into the final 3 verses that are on the song. But just kind of reflecting on how I feel like, especially the last verse of that song talks about me feeling like I've kind of peaked already, like I've done all of the best things I'm going to do and I'll never be able to recapture lightning in a bottle, so to speak. And I feel like writing that was kind of a painful experience, but also a cathartic experience to reflect on that. The other song I would say is the last one, which is Everything I Am. And that one I think is a pretty straightforward, just love song. But I've always felt like writing love songs and happier songs is honestly a lot harder for me because it feels like it requires such a vulnerability to really show the world your heart and be honest and open about everything you're feeling. That feels more emotionally vulnerable than just flat out saying, hey, I'm sad and I'm struggling. So I think that song is very, very personal to me just because I feel like I accomplished something I've wanted to say for a long time and had a hard time figuring out a way to say it.
Tell me what it's like when you write a song like that, knowing that the people in your life are going to hear it.
I feel like that's honestly the hardest part is when I'm writing something that I'm just thinking of strangers, people I've never met hearing, that feels so much easier. But then in the case of like writing a love song that I know I'm going to show to my fiance and I know she's going to hear it, it's so much harder because there's an extra layer of pressure to say not only the like basic obvious, like, hey, I love you, but to say it in a way that's not overly corny or overly cheesy, in a way that shows something unique. And I feel like it's so hard with that kind of song because so much has been said before in ways that are probably more poetic and deep than I feel like I could say it. So trying to figure out a way to say something that almost feels like worthy of the emotions you feel, like feeling so much joy and love and trying to reflect the amount that you're feeling in a way is so much harder than flat out saying the 3 words, I love you, figuring out a way that the poetry of it matches the things you're actually feeling is always the most challenging part for me.
Has your fiance heard the song?
She has. Yeah. She was the first person I showed it to.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
What did she say? How did she react to it?
It was very cool. She definitely liked it. I think she was almost a little taken aback. I think her exact words were like, it's so weird to think that someone would feel that way about me. But I think she liked it. Hopefully, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. Do you ever think about like her family hearing it or anything like that? Is it sort of like, because tell me a little bit about what that's like on that portion of things, right? Because like you mentioned, writing songs for strangers is one thing, but then having family members hear things is a totally other side of it, right? Like even let's say the less lovey songs on there, the more emotional songs that you have on that record, is there that fear behind that? How do you get over that?
There's definitely a fear around that. I think it was worse when I was very first starting. I think it almost helps to now have a few people listening. It adds a little bit of a buffer. Whereas when I was first releasing music, I released a dozen songs at a point when I had like 5 monthly listeners. So I was like, the only people that are hearing this is my parents and 2 of my friends, which I think is a lot more intimidating than just knowing that they're in the mix of people hearing it. But I think it's definitely still kind of uncomfortable. And I think that almost challenges me in the way that I'm writing to write it better. Like I think having that extra, I don't want to say pressure, but just knowing that people I know are going to hear it makes me want to make sure it's something that I can back up if I need to explain it or talk about it. I mean, not that I would need to, but I like the idea of I write a song and then if someone's like, hey, what does this line mean that I see in real life? I can be like, oh, I know what this means, as opposed to just saying stuff,
Absolutely. You kind of mentioned going from 5 monthly listeners now to, like I mentioned earlier in the show, over 500,000. What do you think it is, especially because that's quite a feat, especially for not having a debut album out yet, to have that many monthly listeners? What's the big draw in that brought in people for Dylan Espeseth before a debut album? What do you think you're doing right in that end of things?
That's a great question. I mean, honestly, I feel like so much of it is luck. Like, not even to be overly humble, but so much of it, I don't know that I could repeat again with a lot of the like marketing stuff. And I posted about my song Falling Faster when it first came out, and it did okay, but I think I got up to like 30,000 monthly listeners, and then just other people that I don't know and have never met posting videos about it ended up doing super well, and a lot of views and a lot of likes and a lot of reposts and all of that, and brought so many new people to my page and my music, which I'm super grateful for. But also, so much of it feels like it was completely out of my hands. Like, I'm really proud of that song. I think it's a great song, but I don't know that it's necessarily better than a lot of the other stuff I've put out. I think it just somehow managed to get in front of the right people at the right times. And I mean, I think there's a testament of writing something that can connect with people and be relatable in a way that when they do hear it, they go, oh, I really like this. But I also know that there's so many songs that people would have a similar reaction to if they did hear, and just, I haven't managed to, or other people haven't managed to get it in front of the right audience. I don't know how that one happened to cut through so much of the noise.
Well, that's amazing. And hopefully more songs from this record cut through the noise as well, in the same way that one did. But I want to talk a little bit about the Rocket Summer. You just recently opened for them. What was that experience like for you?
That was so fun. It was super cool. My sister actually saw the Rocket Summer just a few years ago up here in Seattle, and I wasn't able to go with her, and I was kind of bummed. So being able to go and open for 2 shows for them was gnarly and so fun. It was, I feel like, one of my first experiences with playing outside of the Seattle area, more or less. I'd done like 1 show down in LA before this, and then I did another show with them in Dallas and another show down in LA with the Rocket Summer. So getting kind of out of my usual stomping grounds and seeing some new places I'd never been was super fun. And being able to just take it all in and learn from watching such an incredible artist and incredible act. I feel like I've learned so much about performing just from watching them in their hour-long set.
What's the one thing that you really took away and learned?
So much of it is just about like the intangible energy, and just watching the way that you, or in this case, that the Rocket Summer, Bryce and the whole band walked out and just carried themselves with so much like confidence. It almost feels like a thing that's hard to describe unless you're looking at it, But watching him go up there, and it felt like the moment that he started playing the instruments, everyone's eyes were 100% tuned in, locked in. No one had any distraction. It was just so incredible. It's like one of those things that I don't know how to recreate it aside from just like emulating that energy as best you can.
The Rocket Summer, they definitely have more of that elder emo audience behind them. How do you find playing your music in front of their audience was perceived amongst that crowd?
I think it was perceived well, hopefully. I really enjoyed it. I think it's so much fun. I feel like those people and the music that, I don't want to say those people, I guess, but the older emo crowd and the music that they love is the exact same music that I grew up on and love so dearly. So I think there's like this idea of older emo versus next gen emo and all of that. But I think really we're all into the same stuff and the same music. And I so respect the people who kind of paved the path and created the scene and walked before me. So I think I was just honored to get to be in that space and playing my music for those people.
I got to know, are there any sort of like, I guess, tropes or styles that you intentionally leaned into or avoided with this record? And I guess just as an artist yourself?
Yeah, I would say, I think I've heard artists for a long time, like, talk about kind of this idea of you don't want to have your whole record be like one thing or whatever. And almost this idea of putting in songs that are like, aren't going to be as successful or as much of hits. And for a long time, I was like, I don't know why you'd do that. Just make every single song a hit, which feels like such a stupid thing to say in hindsight. But when I was younger, I feel like that's so much of what I thought was just like, just make every single song a top 10 smash and you'll be good. But I think finally making this record and like making a longer full length project, I got to see like, we made our first 4 songs of the record and I was like, these are so good and I'm so proud of these. And now I'm like, we've done it. We've made that sound. I want to do 3 more songs that sound the exact opposite and sound totally different. So I think like, I don't know that there's specific tropes, but just in my own style, I was like, I want to make sure that this album is not all one thing. I want it to sound like it's all a part of the same project, but I feel like there's at least 3 or 4, if not 5 different genres represented in the style throughout the songs.
What's something that you really want people to know about you as an artist?
I think just that I'm trying my best. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, I guess I am trying my best, but I think the big thing is just that I'm trying to be as honest as I can. And sometimes I'll see comments on my posts or other people's posts just talking about like being overly negative or having like such a negative outlook when you're writing this style of music. But I think so much of it is just me trying to be honest and reflect on my own feelings and experiences. And I think a lot of the time that does come out in this like emo style, but I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think that's necessarily being negative either. I think it's a good and healthy thing to get that emotion out and to scream about your mental breakdowns over an acoustic guitar. So I think just everything I write, I try to write as earnest and honestly as possible from my own lived experience.
I love that. I love that. And now your debut record coming out in February. You just wrapped up those shows with the Rocket Summer. Besides the debut record, what do you want people to keep a lookout for? What do you want people to know in that side of things? Do you have more tour dates or anything else that you can tell us for people to watch out for on your end of things?
I don't have any tour dates booked right now, but I do have some music videos coming out. One just came out for Circles, and then there's a few more for some of the singles that are coming up that I'm super proud of. They're the first time I've done like a real proper music video, so I'm stoked on those, and I'm really excited for everyone to see that. I guess that's the big thing aside from the record itself is the visuals are something that I feel like me and my whole team put a lot of time and effort into trying to reflect the sound with how everything looks.
Which that must be a challenge as well.
Yeah, I feel like this was the first time I feel like I've started to get a grasp on the visual element. I think my last few releases, my like last couple EPs and singles, I think were where I really started finding my sound. And then when we started working on kind of the rollout for this album, I was like, the one thing I feel like is missing is kind of a cohesive visual world. And I went in and made a bunch of Pinterest boards, and my management and some of the label people looked over them and added things and gave me some like recommendations. And we kind of put all our brains together to figure out like, what is the style of this? What does this song look like? Which is very fun, but also a very different process, I feel like, to the music making process itself.
Definitely. So everyone's got to look out for those videos, look out for the debut album in the new year. And Dylan, one of the things that we do here at the end of the show is we give some shout out to some underrated bands, because the whole point of the show here is to find new, awesome music. I always say it's not my space, it's our space to continue to grow the scene, to find new music. So especially as, you know, a young artist yourself, who are some hardworking, up and coming bands or artists that you'd love to shout out?
Yes, I love this question. Doan, Doan. He and I are mutuals on TikTok and Instagram. I've never actually met him in real life, but his music is so good. It's incredible. I have it on repeat all the time. Another one, June Henry. Incredible. Very like folk punk centric. Super good. I think probably her entire catalog is in my playlist right now. Saturdays at Your Place, which I think you had on this show. But
I did have on the show. Yeah. I love them. Yeah.
I've been bumping them nonstop lately. I think I was kind of late to the party on them. I just found them recently, but those are probably like the three newer up and coming artists that I've had in my rotation heavy lately.
it's funny to say like late to the party because some of these bands, like, you know, they've been doing their stuff for a while and they've been putting out good music for a while. But I still feel like there's no such thing as late to the party unless it's like, you know, you're 40 years old and just found out about Metallica, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They just found out about My Chemical Romance and you're 35 years old and we're listening to the Used this whole time.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, a lot of amazing artists doing their thing. So I appreciate those shout outs and I appreciate you checking out the show and catching the Saturdays at Your Place record. They're amazing. And
So
I appreciate you doing the show today, Dylan.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I hope I wasn't too rambly with my my talking, but I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, absolutely not, man. You're here to do the talking. I'm here to do the listening. And same thing with the audience. We're all here to hear what you say. And of course, to hear more about your music and of your music. So I'm really looking forward to this record getting released in February.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for listening to OurSpace with Matt Vettese. If you enjoyed yourself, please support the show by subscribing and leaving a review.